Hey everybody, it's Eric Hayden from the National Weather Service in Newport Morehead City. We're just about to get started here. It's about 6:15. This is our first Facebook Live. Please provide comments below if you really like it, any questions you might have. This is something new we're starting with a couple offices across the country, testing this out and see how you like this service. We'll wait just about 30 seconds to really get started to let folks log on. The purpose of this Facebook Live is to talk about our balloon launch tonight. It's going to be a long process, about 45 minutes. We're going to show you the different parts of the balloon. Then the balloon itself will be right around 7 o'clock tonight. So hang tight. We'll get started here in a second. We want folks to get a chance to log on. Be sure to ask questions throughout this Facebook Live. We will take time to answer that as we get it. So again, hang tight. We'll get started here in a second. All right, everybody, I'm joined by Tom Lanka. He is going to do the balloon tonight. And Tom, we're starting off in the back room. Folks might think that, we're outside right away, but we've got to start with 3 pieces for the balloon itself. So what are you going to start off with?
Oh, that's right. So here we actually have the radiosonde unit. It's still packaged up here nicely. So this is the instrument that's going to track the temperature, humidity, winds, pressure as the balloon is carrying it up through the atmosphere.
Okay.
And then here is the actual weather balloon, which we're going to fill up outside in the balloon inflation shelter. And then we have a parachute attached between the balloon and the radiosonde itself, so that way the radiosonde doesn't come crashing down to Earth at full speed, so it comes down nice and slowly. So these are the 3 parts, 3 components.
All right, everybody, we're going to follow Tom. Try not to get wrapped up too much with our cords. We've got some mics, so hopefully this audio is good for everybody. So we're going to follow him into operations. He's going to enter some of those parts. We track the serial numbers, track everything with that. So while he's doing that, that's not as exciting. So we're going to talk to Chris and Mike, a couple other employees here with us tonight that are helping us with Facebook Live and also doing some of the forecasting tonight. So in addition to the balloon launch, you're getting a little tour of operations as well. So Tom, as you do your thing now, you're going to log some of the serial numbers, and as we get headed outside, why don't you unplug the mic? For those listening at home, especially if you have headphones on, you might have noticed just a little pop. Hopefully it sounds better now. So while Tom's getting ready, you'll notice it's pretty quiet in operations. If you were to see us during Florence, every single workstation would be occupied. If you were to see our operations 2 weeks ago when we had the moderate risk for severe weather, every workstation occupied. So tonight, pretty quiet. At all times, we have at least 2 staff members on staff here 24/7. During a Florence or severe weather outbreak, we certainly have more. One person we have with us tonight is Mike Lee, one of our new employees. He's really helping us a lot. If you saw any of the cool graphics promoting this Facebook Live, that was all him. And Mike, we really want to encourage folks to ask questions and interact with us tonight, and that's what you're going to be helping us with.
That's right. I'll be monitoring the live feed and the live questions that come in. So if you have any questions regarding weather, the atmosphere, or the weather balloon, anything, just let us know, and we'll answer them live.
Now you might notice that the office is a little dark. Sometimes we keep it like that because we're working 24/7, reduces the glare on the computers, and sometimes makes us feel a little bit better to have kind of a darker setting. So we're a little darker in here tonight. At the same time we're doing this balloon launch, I mentioned we always have at least 2 people in the office. And Chris Collins, you've been here. How long have you been at the office, Chris?
I've been at the office 21 years almost.
All right. And Chris, what are you working on tonight?
Well, I'm the short-term forecaster. My forecast period really focuses on tonight and into tomorrow. And a couple of specialized forecasts I'm working on is the aviation. And we do forecasts for various airports, so I kind of have to see what the trends are in our satellite image that I'm looking at here to see if we're going to have areas of fog or low visibility tonight. And I'm also working on the marine forecast for the boaters, what the winds and seas and that sort of thing are going to be later on. So my focus is really on what's going to happen tonight, early tomorrow.
All right, so Chris, you're doing that on the evening shift. How does that differ? Maybe later tonight we have another group of folks that get in at 11, and then we have another main shift during the day. How does that differ, an evening shift from one of our other main shifts?
Well, in the evening shift, we don't get a lot of new model data coming in, so typically we're just sort of fine-tuning, maybe the next few hours of the forecast, whereas on the mid shift and later on the day shift, they have more of the new guidance to work with the new models and things, so they can actually do a longer forecast period, whereas I'm just doing a little bit of fine tuning of the next several hours of the forecast tonight.
All right, a lot of people want to know what's the weather like next couple days. Can you show us the high temperatures maybe tomorrow?
Yeah.
We've been certainly enjoying some warm weather.
Yeah, it looks like similar conditions to what we've had the last couple of days. Maybe low 80s right here along the coast and some mid 80s inland. So about the third or fourth really nice, warm, actually slightly above normal day we've had.
All right, and if you couldn't see those numbers, it's well into the 80s, as Chris said, so certainly another warm day expected across our area. So, Chris, thank you so much for letting us know, what's going on in operations and the forecast itself. Tom is actually preparing the balloon a little bit more. You can see some of the instrumentation out of the packaging. This was the package for the weather balloon itself. Here's the parachute. What he's doing right now is entering some of the numbers on the packaging. We track it. If we have any issues, that's how we'll be able to track it and things of that nature. So while Tom continues to do this, I'm going to go over to him at his workstation and kind of show you the Radiosonde. You can see it down on the table right there. Next to it is the balloon. And when we say Radiosonde, that is the actual instrument that will go up into the atmosphere, measuring things, as he mentioned, such as temperature, humidity, pressure, and wind direction. So while Tom gets ready, we're going to take a walk outside. We're going to show you some equipment outside and kind of get going in that direction so Tom can finish up. So again, if you're joining us, really appreciate you taking the time to do so. The point of this Facebook Live is to talk about our balloon launch tonight. If you're just logging on, we're just about 6:25. So the balloon process itself takes some time, about 10 to 15 minutes to fill it up with gas, and Tom's going to talk a little bit more about that. And then the actual launch won't happen until about 7 o'clock. So if you're just tuning in, you certainly have plenty of time to watch what we're doing. So we're going to take a tour outside. One thing to point out is we're one of over 100 offices in the country for the National Weather Service. Not all offices do balloon launches, but we are certainly all here to serve you. If you're watching from a distance, Newport, North Carolina is in far eastern North Carolina. I always like to tease people, if you go as far east in North Carolina as you can before you hit the ocean, that is our office. We are a unique office in that not all offices do balloon launches. So we do these launches twice a day, not only at our office, but all over the world. This time of year with daylight savings time, we do it at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. We'll talk a little bit more about this with Tom. We do this no matter what in terms of weather. The only exception would be if there's lightning. So we had some pretty brave coworkers during Florence, the peak of the storm, wind and rain, doing those balloon launches. In fact, Florence is a pretty good example that we can increase the balloon launch to 4 times a day if there's severe weather. So we did it during Florence. There was no lightning, so we were able to do that. So lightning is the only time that we cannot do a balloon launch. So here comes Tom with the Radiosonde and the parachute and the balloon itself. And so we'll follow you out, Tom, and then we'll get you mic'd up again as we head on out. For those folks watching from home, if you are local, you're welcome to take a tour. Our website is weather.gov/MHX. So we actually do tours, not only of the balloon launch itself, but of the office. So if you live anywhere locally, Greenville, Jacksonville, the Outer Banks, that's kind of our coverage area as well. At one point tonight, as the balloon fills up, there's not much more to see, so we're going to talk about that. Does anybody know what that is up there? I've got some younger children at home, and they like to joke around that it looks like a giant soccer ball. So we'll talk more about that. And if you missed it in the beginning, Mike Lee, one of our newer employees, he's watching on Facebook on one of our office iPads. So we're here to take your questions. We certainly need some questions because as that balloon fills up, we're going to do a little Q&A probably after about 6:45, 6:50, and then the launch itself will be at 7. So as we're walking out here, you'll notice a couple things. We're not right next to the building, and that's for a good reason. As we launch this balloon, we picked a night like tonight, nice light winds, not a lot going on. We need to be as far away from objects as possible because during something like a Hurricane Florence or even a windy day, it gets pretty difficult to launch a balloon in the wind, and you certainly don't want any obstruction. So we got some trees in the distance. As I back up a little bit, there's the office that we were just at. And then to my left, We're looking due north. There's a radio tower and some of our equipment here at the office. So again, I don't know how good the perspective you can get, but we have a pretty big area to launch this balloon so we can get going. All right, so Tom's going to get us into the building. This is the building itself where we're going to launch the balloon. At the very top, you'll kind of notice that dome shape. That is where we actually track the balloon. So once he launches this balloon via GPS, we track it, and that's how we calculate the wind speed and direction as it goes up into the atmosphere. You'll notice two doors, one big door to the north. As I come around the other way, I'm going to try to get the sun to my back so you all can see this a little bit better. There's also one door to the south. So we will come out of the door that puts the wind to our back. So gorgeous night like tonight, just a few puffy cumulus clouds, a little bit of cirrus, not a lot going on weather-wise. Doesn't really matter what door we come out. If it's a real windy night, we mentioned during Florence, we'll try to come out with the wind to our back so the actual building itself blocks the wind just a little bit. So Tom's opening one of those doors now. So this is the actual area where we get everything together in terms of loading or filling up the balloon with gas. I'm going to hook up Tom here in a second, but he's starting to turn on the gas itself. And why don't we use this time, Tom, just to make sure we got the audio good and you can talk when you get a chance. So I got a good question from Brian. He's watching from upstate New York. Brian, I appreciate the question. And his question is, besides lightning, are there any other reasons, weather-related, we might not be able to launch? Lightning is the only written one. But we certainly wouldn't launch like during a tornado or something that high of a wind event, but pretty much lightning. So those folks up your way, Brian, up toward Minnesota, the plains, those folks are launching it in the snow as well.
All right, so I'm going to start the process of unwrapping the balloon here, and you're going to see it's quite large. And you can see I'm actually touching the bag and not the balloon itself. And that's because as the balloon inflates, it's going to get real large. And if there's any kind of fingerprint oil or any kind of debris on the balloon, you create a little bit of a weakness in the balloon itself, and it could burst early. So we don't want that to happen. So I'm only touching the very end here. So I'm going to attach this to the nozzle. And this is where the hydrogen will come out, and then we clamp it on here with the clamp so it doesn't come loose. Now I'm going to go over here, around here, if you want to follow me this way, Eric, right, so I can turn the gas on. So this is how we turn the hydrogen on. And you might be able to hear the fans going. There's two fans in the building, and that's in case there's a hydrogen leak, we want to evacuate the gas out of the building.
And you may notice all these instructions on the wall. A little brag on our office. Tony Saavedra is one of the program leaders of the program at our office. Every single person does the balloon launch at our office. That includes somebody like me. I'm a public liaison, a manager, our meteorologist in charge, forecasters. Tom is a forecaster. So every single person does the balloon launch. And that means that we rotate through different people that do it. So it's not the same 2 or 3 people that do the balloon launch. So Tony does a good job with that program. We've been ranked as one of the better offices in the country. I'm going to get on the other side there. Tom, just get to the sun to my back. There we go. So Tom has hooked up the balloon itself. It's starting to inflate. And I got one question for you. I noticed that you've got the balloon all hooked up. Everything's looking good. You're getting the balloon out. We have a question, what kind of gas do we use at this office?
We're using hydrogen.
So hydrogen right now, thank you, Peter, for the question. We have used helium in the past. We order hydrogen, so if there's an issue with supply, we do have a backup tank of helium in case that happens. The other thing I noticed as you're doing this is the balloon is inflating. I encourage folks, we actually have a time lapse of this on our YouTube page. It is youtube.com/NWS Morehead City. So you can see this process in about 30 seconds. But what I was going to ask you, Tom, Do you want to talk about this now, or we've got some
Sure.
weights over here? What's that all about?
Yeah, so the base weight, which is 1,000 grams, is only the balloon, the weight of the balloon, the string that it's attached to, the parachute, and the radiosonde instrument. So if we were just to put 1,000 grams in here, it would basically float and wouldn't rise up through the atmosphere. So these weights, it's essential to put at least 400 grams on here. And we're going to use 400 grams extra today because it's a good weather day. So the balloon is going to go up at around 5 meters per second, which is the standard. We don't want it to go too fast or too slow. We want it to go just about that 5 meters per second to get a good reading of the atmosphere. Now, one thing to note is we have extra weights, a lot of extra weights. So this big one here is 1,000 grams. So we have before put an extra 1,000 grams in the balloon. And can anybody guess when we would do that?
So people are watching outside right now. You mentioned the different weights we add, and we put a certain amount of gas, in this case hydrogen, 13, 14, 1,500 grams. When would we go up toward 2,000? Comment below what type of weather. Maybe we'll let them comment, Tom, and we'll come back to that. It's a sunny day today, but what type of weather would we have that we would need extra gas? So we'll let that kind of simmer a little bit, and comment below. Again, we've got Mike. I want to make sure I got my son to the back. He's on the iPad, so he is there, able to feed us questions. And you can see the balloon, filling up. It looked pretty big just when Tom stretched it out. Gets about as big as an arm's length before we launch it.
So what I'm going to do now is attach the battery pack to the radiosonde. So this is going to give the instrument enough juice to transmit back to the office. It's going to take about an hour and a half, or an hour to 45 minutes for this to reach 90,000 feet is typical. We want the balloon to get real high up. We get graded, and the higher it goes, the more points we get. So if it gets to around 90,000 feet, that's a perfect score for us.
And
So
Jason, thanks for that question. Tom said about 90, and I know Tom he's very good at this, along with a lot of our staff. Tom, about 110, maybe about the highest we can get, sometimes about 111,000 feet.
That's
So
right.
If you hear that sound, that's just a little constriction in the balloon itself. The gas is going through, it's just making that sound itself. So 90 to 110,000 feet. If you've flown a plane before or been in a plane, commercial, that's about almost three times the height of a plane flight. So that's up there.
So now I'm going to take the string and actually attach it to the radiosonde, and I'm going to loop it through a couple times just to make sure we got a nice snug connection and it doesn't come loose. Usually about 2 or 3 knots is sufficient.
This looks great, Tom. Just so you know, folks at home are able to see, Tom's about 6 feet tall. Definitely works out some, so we've got some muscles on him, and that's a pretty big balloon right there. So Tom's giving us a pretty good perspective even standing there. So remember in the beginning with Tom, we talked about 3 parts to the balloon. You see a string coming out, and he mentioned doing some loops. So this is the bottom part of the 3-part process. This is the radiosonde, and we covered it earlier, but again, as you take this out to our shepherd's hook, what kinds of things does this weather station measure? So what kind of things, Tom, does this measure?
Yeah, so this actually measures air pressure, atmospheric pressure, wind speed, and it's the GPS unit that's inside that's tracking the balloon as it moves horizontally along the ground. And we measure the wind speed through that. Also measures humidity, which is the hygrometer here, and the temperature, which is the thermometer here. So these are very sensitive parts, so I don't like to touch them.
Now I see the silver thing is temperature and humidity, but what's that thing dangling on the bottom, that little canister?
So this is actually, there's a envelope in here, a mailing envelope with an address in here, a self-addressed address. And so occasionally people will find these. They're going to come back to the Earth, and there's the option to put the instrument back in this mailing envelope and send it back to the address. I believe it's somewhere in DC. They can actually refurbish these units.
All right, very good. So again, this is going back to the very beginning. We've got 3 parts. We've got the balloon. In the middle is a parachute, and then this is the very bottom. And is this about 100 feet? I can never remember, of string that we've got this dangling down.
Yeah, 120 feet.
120 feet. So this is the radiosonde, the actual package that's going up. And any of you folks that have a home weather station, anemometer, wind vane, temperature, it's doing all those same things, but obviously it's got to be a lot. It's got to be a lot smaller and light so it can actually get up into the atmosphere. Do you want me to go under that? Okay.
I'm going to unhook just a moment.
All right.
Here.
We unhooked our mic because we didn't want Tom to get taken up into the sky with that string. That would definitely make for a Facebook Live moment. All right, so 120 feet of string goes from the radiosonde itself. Now, look at that. Look how big it's gotten. It still takes a little while to fill up. So folks that have logged on early, it's still filling up with gas. So it takes about 10 to 15 minutes. I forgot, how many grams do you have in there?
There's 1,400 grams total.
1,400 grams. So about an average flight. And what we mean by that, Tom was talking about this. Look at the sky. We certainly live in a nice place here in eastern North Carolina. Just a few patchy cumulus clouds and some cirrus, but light winds. And as he mentioned, if we had maybe thick clouds or rain or wind or in the wintertime snow, he would have to add 15, 16, 18, maybe 2,000 grams of, in this case, hydrogen gas so that the balloon could actually get up through that atmosphere. But today, pretty basic day, so we're not adding, kind of doing base level amounts.
And the reason why we have so much string between the balloon and the instrument itself, we don't want, as the balloon gets bigger and bigger as it goes up into the atmosphere, it's going to create a wake, similar to what an airplane does. There's a wake behind it. So we don't want any misrepresentation of the winds as that goes up. So the radiosonde is quite a ways behind the actual balloon.
All right, very good. So we got a little more ways. I want to show the folks the balloon itself. You can see, get Tom in the picture for some perspective. And this is the part he talked about, the weights. So the base is 1,000, and then this is another 400, so 1,400 grams. What will happen is when the weight is reached in the balloon, this will lift up, and it will turn off the gas going into the balloon itself. So that's how we know that we've got 1,400 grams. The gas will shut off, and we're good to go with that. So you've got something bright and orange, and I think most folks can guess. This is the third part of the balloon process. The very top is the balloon. The very bottom, over 100 feet of string, go all the way out to that shepherd's hook. That's where the radiosonde is. But in the middle, if this thing has fallen from 110,000 feet or 100,000 feet, we want it to come down slow. And what's that part there in the middle, Tom?
Well, this is the actual parachute. So, and the good thing about having this is when it does come back to the Earth, it's very visible, so people can see. They're most likely going to see the parachute first, so that'll catch their eye, and then most likely they'll see the radiosonde attached to that.
All right.
So now I'm cutting a piece of string, and this piece of string is going to be between the parachute and the actual balloon. So it's about 4 feet. That's about sufficient, and that's all you really need. It's not too important, this part of it. So I usually go 2 arms lengths. There.
I mentioned earlier that our entire staff here does this, from the forecasters to management. And so this last part he's doing, he will not put on the balloon until the balloon is filled up. But that is the actual knot that will close off the balloon, and then the other side of that will connect to the top of the parachute. And how many knots do you make there, Tom? I don't know. I probably make way too many.
I use 3.
Okay. I probably do 6, 7, or 8. Just a couple is probably sufficient. But this thing, again, it's going up there. 110,000 feet. Takes about an hour and a half from the time we launch, so maybe 8:20, 8:30. This will complete its flight and pop and come back down to the surface.
So I'm going to cut actually one more string, and this is just to actually tie off the balloon once it's finished inflating.
So
Doesn't have to be very long. It's just enough to make a tie up.
While Tom's doing that, encouraging folks, again, ask questions. We've answered a few of them in the comments below. We've got Mike around the other side of the building. Once this fills up, Tom's going to head back into the office. We will not follow him, and that's when we're going to do our Q&A. I know some folks, we've answered your questions throughout this Facebook Live, but we're going to answer more coming up. If we've got a little time, we'll talk about the radar and some of the other instrumentation we have here. And please comment below what you think of this. This is, trying to show folks in the community what we're doing. We're about $7 a year to fund us. We're part of the Department of Commerce, and we fall under NOAA. And our main thing is protection of life and property, and this goes with the data collection. If we know what's happening above us, we have a pretty good idea on making a forecast for the future.
So it's getting close. You see, I'm not pushing up on it too much, so it's just about as large as it'll get. We also look for any imperfections. Sometimes the balloon is stretched out a little bit, becomes a little bit egg-shaped. So if we see that start to happen, maybe we cut down on the gas a little bit. We don't put too much, because then it'll rocket up there a little bit quicker. But this one looks pretty good. It's a good size.
So if everybody can see that, it's a pretty good even shape. Tom mentioned if it's elongated or different, up. And I don't know if we got these microphones so you could hear us well. I don't know if you heard that the gas stopped. So we're at 1,400 grams. The balloon's pretty much ready to go. It might be hard to hear that with our microphones, but the gas has shut off.
So this is the most important part, to me anyway, is, well, you want to turn off the gas first, and then what we do is we tie off the balloon. We got to make it real snug. I mean, real tight knot, because any little bit of a leak is not good, because then the balloon's going to slow down as it rises up. So I make one loop there and give it a nice tight snug there. And then again, this is where I make my 3 loops. And I've never had a problem making 3, so far so good.
That's really neat. Tom has been doing this. How long have you been at the Newport office, Tom?
8 years.
8 years. And how about in the Weather Service itself?
That would be almost 13 years now.
All right. So we have a nice mix of experience here. Tom is one of the younger ones and 13 years of experience. So we're very lucky. And then we have folks that have been here since the office was established in the middle 90s. So very lucky to have a good amount of staff with experience.
So now I've got the balloon secured there, and I'm actually going to tie the parachute and the train. We call it the train, which is the balloon, the parachute, and the actual radio sound is the train. So now I also make several loops. Make sure that's nice and snug. So I'm going to make 3 knots as well. And that should be plenty sufficient there. So now our balloon is ready. It's ready for launch. Well, not quite ready. Physically it's ready, but we still got to do some calibration inside.
All right, Tom, why don't you unplug? Tom's going to head inside and do some of that calibration. Mike is going to join me. We'll do a little Q&A and then take you on a tour until you come out. What time do you have there, Tom?
We've got approximately 6:45 p.m.
About 6:45. So, Tom, we'll see you in about 15 minutes as you head on out. Thank you very much.
Good.
I'm going to come in here so I can, the glare on the phone, a little hard to see. I want to switch the camera around to Mike and myself so that we can do a little Q&A. All right, Mike, let's get ourselves positioned in the sun.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to show folks a little bit was the gas itself. We've got, we'll kind of put that in the background for now, a lot of hydrogen tanks here. So we get deliveries of this gas for our balloon launch. We'll step over into the shade so we're not glaring too much here. All right. Get that Doppler radar behind us. All right, so this is Mike Lee, one of our newer forecasters at the Weather Service. Behind us is the Radiosonde building. Really appreciate folks asking questions. They'll continue to come in. If you're just tuning in and watching this Facebook Live, this is the first time we've done it, so we welcome comments. About 10 minutes from now will be the actual launch itself. So if you stay for the whole process, you'll see the launch at about 7 o'clock. And Mike, what questions do we have here from folks? I appreciate you helping us out on the iPad. What do we have from folks?
Well, I got an interesting question from Pete Gray from Newport. He says he was an Air Force heavy metal back in what he says is a previous life, so I assume back in the day. He's done balloon releases and sensor releases in his past. He's asking what the odds are if something goes wrong in flight. So let's say if it hits an airplane, or if maybe a bird accidentally smacks into it.
Okay.
What are some issues that we see during the flight of a balloon?
So some issues that we have, you've had one of these, unfortunately. Right. I'm going to change the camera around. It seems like we have a big open field. I don't know how well you can make it out with, hopefully our quality of cell network is looking really good. There's a radio tower to the left. This is due north of our office. And unfortunately, on one of Mike's first launches, the balloon hit the tower and it went off, but the Radiosonde stayed. So we have had times during Florence, that line of trees over there, a balloon crashed into the trees and kept going, but the Radiosonde, the actual instrument package, remained behind. So very rarely does it happen. We cannot launch the balloon any earlier than 7 o'clock, but we have an hour-and-a-half window to do that. So let's just say something like that happened tonight. We would have an hour-and-a-half window to get a new balloon up. So we would do that same process, a little bit more accelerated, and have another shot at it. So we have an hour-and-a-half window to make amends, and sometimes it's not our fault. Maybe the computer software has a hiccup, and we do have to do a new launch. But I'd say less than 5% of the time, it's pretty rare that happens.
Yeah. And then we got one question from Brian. How many units does it typically? How many units does the Weather Service recover from a Radiosonde? So when the Radiosondes launch, they go up in the air and then they fall back down. How many units do we typically get back as a Weather Service as a whole? Not just us, but as a Weather Service as a whole, back in from any type of launch that occurs.
So I think I keep saying the 5% figure, but it's not a lot. Something probably less than 5 or 10%. And reason for that, even though the balloon itself looks really big, I'm going to give you another kind of look at that. It looks gigantic. When that pops and it comes back down to the earth, it's such a vast area that it could land in. Woods, fields, things of that nature. So it's pretty rare that we get it back. Here in Newport, Morehead City, our winds usually carry it to our east, so we don't get it recovered. A couple years ago, I don't know if it was last summer or the year before, we had a couple balloons that had landed on Country Club Road. And if you're familiar with Morehead City at all, that is not far from the office. And those particular days, the winds were extremely light. So they pretty much just landed very close to our office, within 10 miles, which is pretty darn close.
And I guess as in general, story-wise, for the whole entire Weather Service, what is the craziest weather balloon story that we've heard so far? Has a weather balloon gone from one office to another, or has it gone and landed in, for instance, let's say, the White House, anywhere?
Yeah, I think, I don't know of any other office stories. I think they've had some that were recovered and folks don't know what it is. Tom showed you that on the bottom there's an area that the balloon has a mailing bag that can be sent back. But on the side of the Radiosonde, our instructions how to send it back, and what it is. Because again, if you saw this thing fall out of the sky and you weren't a meteorologist or you hadn't seen this live stream, you might really question what it is. I think the funniest story here, it's funny, but it shows the commitment of our staff, is launching during Florence. It was pretty a wild event. We had folks that were out here. Donnie King, one of our employees at the office, he does computers, and it's all hands on deck. And he was out here along with Mac, one of our newer employees at the time, launching balloons with other folks, just helping them out. Tony was out there, one of our more experienced employees. So it was funny to see them, not sopping wet coming back into the office, but now 6, 7, 8 months later, a lot of us are still feeling that sting. We're still recovering. We're still waiting for repairs to be made. So to kind of look back at an event and see some comedy in it is hard to do, but to see that balloon stretched out, trying to launch it in 40, 50, 60 mile per hour wind, pretty difficult.
And you guys may have covered this already, but why do we have to launch the weather balloons in such terrible conditions? So for instance, during Florence, why do we have to launch it 4 times a day? Do we need that information for everything to work?
That's a great question. So we're not going to put ourselves in harm's way if possible. But sometimes the most important data is during the most active and severe weather. So again, lightning, we're not going outside. We'll wait for the storm to pass. As Mike mentioned, we did it 4 times a day during Florence, not just our office, our sister office down in Charleston, and all up and down the East Coast and the Gulf of Mexico. And it really shows how important that data is. It's done twice a day, year round, but during the winter storm 2 years ago, and during Florence, we did it 4 times a day. The National Weather Service headquarters, the Hurricane Center, we all get on the same page and say, hey, this is an event where we need to do more releases. And it's during those severe times that we really need that data above us. Because again, the weather that we're talking about, that's down where Mike, myself, Tom live. It's all happening here to us, but where it's generating and taking place is all up in the atmosphere. So if we can only rely on weather stations and our own surface equipment, we're missing a huge part of the pie in terms of what's happening. We need to know what's the temperature up there, what is the wind speed up there. And that forecast, I think it was about 5 days out, had about 2 miles of error. The folks down at the Hurricane Center do an excellent job. And one of the reasons for that is their dedication and research year to year. But another reason is that quality data going into the computer models. So again, a Florence, a big winter storm, we'll do it 4 times a day. And you can kind of think of it like a high resolution TV. You're getting more resolution more frequently of the atmosphere more launches you do. Now, Mike, some folks might say, well, why don't we do 4 times a year all the time? It's about $200 to $300 per launch. Nobody likes a ton of taxes, so we try to balance, economy and cost with what is needed. So 2 times a day is what is normal, but we'll certainly do more as a weather service when the weather is active.
So we got another question from us, from Brian. He's asking, it's a little bit more of a technical question. Is our office planning to transition to what they call an auto sonde?
Good question, Brian. I appreciate the questions. Continue to have those come in. I think eventually, maybe down the road, I'm not as sure about that. One really cool thing, and what Brian's talking about is, in the Weather Service, we're always looking of ways to be more efficient. We don't want to lose the quality. We don't want to lose what we're getting out of it. But if we can do more efficient things, we can be in the community more. So we're working with the local partners, emergency managers, local broadcast media, and if we're able to be freed up through efficient means, we're certainly looking at that. What we are doing here is really neat. It should be in the next year or so. We order hydrogen. I mentioned this before, that we do have a helium tank or 2 floating around as a backup. But look at all these tanks. We have a contracted vendor that comes on out and delivers this to us, but eventually we'll be testing. We're a test office for hydrogen generation, so we'll be making our own hydrogen here at the office. So that's a pretty cool thing that we're looking forward to coming up. Now, Mike, about what time do you got on your watch?
Right now, let's find out.
So the reason why I'm saying that, I know we have a few new people that have just joined us. We should be close to 7. We're about 6:54, and if I know Tom, he loves to get the balloon up into the sky right about 7 o'clock. So if you're waiting and you're just watching, about 6 minutes from now, we're going to see that balloon launch And again, that is taking place all over the world at the same time. So all across the country, not only our country, but the world itself is doing that balloon launch at 7 o'clock.
So one interesting question we're getting is, Eric, how long can we keep our eyes on the weather balloon on a nice day like today?
So if you have decent eyes, it could be 5 or 10 minutes. This is a pretty good day. We don't have a lot of clouds. As I kind of pan around, again, we have a nice thin set of cirrus clouds over us. So probably at least 5 minutes we'll be able to see it. If we had some low clouds over our area or anything obscuring the sky, such as rain or fog, it could be just less than just a couple minutes itself. The best day would be a totally clear day, but also a day similar to today where we don't have a lot of wind, because as this thing takes off, it's going to go up into the atmosphere, and it's going to be relatively straight up if we don't have a lot of wind like today. Where if it was a windy day, even if it was sunny out, it may take a hard left or hard right on the horizon, and we may lose it pretty quickly. So on average, about 5 to 10 minutes, and I can see Mike put in there just about 5 minutes until we do that launch itself. And let's take a look at the balloon while we're at it. Again, it's fully inflated. Today we went on the lower end, or basic, about 1,400 grams of hydrogen. As Tom mentioned, if you joined us earlier, we will add additional gas if the weather is bad, if it's raining, if it's cloudy, if it's windy, if we have any icing conditions. And the reason for that, the more gas in the balloon, the faster it will go and get up through the atmosphere. And on those days, it's hard to get through the atmosphere. So we need to compensate for those things weighing the balloon down. So we've got the balloon, we've got the parachute, and then again, over 100 feet of string as we follow this out down to the shepherd's hook is where the radiosonde is itself to go up into the sky. We mentioned this in the beginning, the giant thing that looks like a soccer ball in the sky in the tower, that's actually the Doppler radar. So this is the Doppler radar in Newport. If you ever get radar information, might be on one of your favorite apps, local TV station. Most of the time it's from the National Weather Service. So again, those are your tax dollars at work. The thing that makes the Doppler radar neat, in reflectivity mode, it shows us the intensity of the rainfall, snowfall, hail, what's going on. But because of the Doppler effect, we can actually measure winds blowing to and away from the radar. So while we don't actually see tornadoes, we can see very strong rotation, and that would be a time that we would issue a tornado warning. So that is the Doppler radar right behind our office itself. So we got a couple questions. I'll take these. Jesse, thanks for chiming in. The comment was the radar dome looks really clean, and yes, it does. I'm not a big fan of heights, so luckily I did not have to clean it. If you go to YouTube/NWS Morehead City, we had a crew out here a month or two ago, and they cleaned not only the radar dome itself, but the upper air building as well. We have a time lapse of that. So that's the reason why it's shiny. And another question that came into our office from one of our big fans was, how often do we hit the radio tower? And Tom, I know Mike, I'm not to pick on Mike, hit it recently, but had it happened before?
Yes.
A couple times?
It's happened at least twice.
All right.
Once with Mike and once
We'll get
with,
you-
I don't know who. But
So-
it's happened a couple times.
As Tom gets plugged in, it's happened a couple times, but when you figure that we're doing this, over 700 times a year at least, not very often.
Eric, while I was inside, I heard you answer a question.
Yes.
I think you were explaining how long after release you can actually see the balloon.
Yeah.
Well, personal story, I was at home. I live 2 miles west of the office. There's a big high pressure over us. It was very light winds all the way up through the atmosphere. And it was over an hour after Tony had released, and I could still see the balloon.
Wow.
The sun had already set, so the sun had set, but it was still hitting the balloon way up high.
Oh, wow.
And Venus was out too, and it looked like Venus.
So folks,
pretty cool.
If you're in the Newport area, I know I've had some softball games over at Fort Benjamin Park. I've been able to see it. If you're driving down Roberts Road where we are, you're driving down 70 and you see the balloon around 7, that's us launching it. And I got a quick question from Jamie here. Do we retrieve the equipment once the balloon pops? And we do not. There is a mailing bag. Folks can send that back to us as needed. Do we have any more questions, or we'll maybe let that go? unless there's anything.
I think the last question we've got is asking about the string.
Okay.
Connecting the Radiosonde to the balloon, if it's made of a special material or is it just regular string? It is regular string. It is pretty heavy duty string. I believe it is about 20 strands of just normal rope that we have. Whenever we can, we use biodegradable materials when available.
You can tell Mike is a new guy. I've been here 2 years and I forgot that fact from the test. He just took the test to pass being able to do the balloon. So Tom, we're going to focus on you a little bit. I think we can stick with you perspective-wise and keep you mic'd up. Do you want to de-mic?
Sure.
Yeah.
We can do that. I'll try not to get tangled up and carried away with the balloon.
We don't want Tom to get carried away. So you go do your thing, Tom. I'll give you space. So everybody, and I see Jamie's ready for the launch. Now, Tom likes to get it close. What time we got there, Mike?
Oh, we're after the top of the hour.
Yeah.
Launch time.
If we had not been doing this, Tom would be right at the top of the hour. Tom is good on that. We looking good there, Mike? All right.
So far, so good. No
So-
entanglements, that's good.
So for those watching from home, we're balancing 2 mics so that you can hear us well. At the same time, trying not to get stuck in this.
Usually I don't have to
100
think
feet
this much.
string. All right.
Try not to get tangled up here. All right.
So I might de-mic, Tom, and then we'll talk to you because I want to stand back a little more, and I definitely don't want you to get.
Okay.
So Mike, if you could, Mike's gonna.
Got it.
All right. So we just de-mic Tom because I do not want him getting tangled in this, and plus we are able to see a little bit better if I get more perspective.
The balloon is going to go towards the radio tower, but should go well over the tower.
So Tom mentioned the balloon is going toward the radio tower. One thing he did inside was check the equipment to make sure the thermometer's working, humidity sensors working. We don't want to launch this thing up in the sky and it's bad equipment. So that's what he was doing in the building. And he also checks the environmental winds. Where's this thing going? And his prediction is off toward the north, which is over there where the radio tower is. So Tom, I'm ready whenever you are. He's got the Radiosonde in his right hand and the balloon, and we're set to go.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
And just for perspective, just where Tom said, over toward the northeast. So you can see that thing looks pretty small once it goes on up. So we'll pause for a second, let you kind of watch this go on up. I like the joke from Jamie, brings a new meaning to clearing the tower. Exactly right. So Jesse and somebody else asked a question. You can see why, we got to watch the tower sometimes, but it's a little hard out here, but hopefully you can still see it. As Tom mentioned, certain days you can see it better than others. Hopefully I'm still on it. It's hard to see this on the iPhone. I can see it to the naked eye, and I'm hoping I'm in the right spot that everybody can see it.
You're still good.
So while we're finishing this up, Jason, thank you for joining us. He gave us a thanks. Please comment below for folks that were not able to see it, and if you think they would be interested in it, share our page. This should be on the page so they can go back and watch it. Look for us on Monday night at 6 o'clock, and then next Thursday, I think it's 7 or 7:30, Carl's going to do a Q&A during Hurricane Preparedness Week, and Monday we're going to broadcast our Hurricane Community Forum, which is in Morehead City. So these are the things that we're going to try to test, more public awareness of what we do, what your tax dollars are being used for. And then next week with Hurricane Preparedness Week starting, we'll talk about more hurricane safety and all of that. So guys, do you have anything else to say? Otherwise, we'll wrap this up.
I think we're good. I think the resolution on the camera is not good enough to catch, but I can still see it. We still have eyes on it right now.
So we can still see
Yeah.
it, but we...
Sorry, I wish we could just give you guys our eyes right now and let you see the balloon. It's still up there. Still flying.
We're going to wrap it up. I really want to thank Tom for doing this. I can barely do two things at once, and he was willing to do this during a Facebook Live, so really appreciative of that. And then Mike, thank you very much for making the graphics and giving us, he's had some experience in his past work experience to help us out with that. So again, please provide comments below what you think about this. Look for us Monday night at 6 for the next Facebook Live, and that will be our Hurricane Community Forum, and that will be live from the Civic Center in Morehead City. Take care, everybody.